Peace. This is the Ash Your Oldhead podcast with Justice Rajee. So we're starting 2020. To start 2020, I thought the best place or a good place for me to go would be what I guess I'll call holding myself accountable by doing. Right. I want to talk about power and power in how that shows up and how it's showing up for me right now, and also how I think it applies to self-development, as all things with this show, as it applies to self-development and showing up in my experience and development as a man, but on a universal level, how people orientate and engage with power, how power shapes the world. In fact, meaning in the material sense, how power affects or impacts the world on the structural, the mental, emotional, social construct level. Things, and just generally what's on my head at the moment in relation to that. So I think a good place to start first is with a definition. Now, for me, power basically means, at its most basic level, the ability to impact your environment. Now, in physics, power is the rate of doing work or transferring heat, i.e. the amount of energy transferred or converted per unit of time, having no direction, blah, 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 blah. It's a scale quality, meaning it's for something to measure its intensity, rather than where it's going or where it's not going. And I popped that one out off the Wikipedia, but that is also consistent with what I remember from the last time I sat down with a physics book, in that sense. So we're going to roll with that. Now, this is important for me because one of the things I think about a lot with your self-development, my own development, is your relationships with power and how that shows up in your early life, how it impacts what you think about yourself, how it impacts what you think about others. I would say also the prevailing notion in the communication and social streams that I've been in the last 10 years, especially around Black men, there's a couple of concepts that repeatedly pop up in terms of, or I see as a source of conflict, relationship-wise, community conversation-wise, and where folks butt heads may be too strong of a word, but where there's some tension, and that is around the how power impacts what Black men are not doing, how Black men show or don't show up, and other men as it spreads out, or perceived power is a really big deal. I often find myself in conversations where someone is explaining to me how one social group or ethnic group or community has this level of power versus the power that we have, and therefore that's why this is happening with us or not happening with us, or why we don't need to be worried about them, or why we shouldn't be concerned about that. Often comes up in the discussion of the relationships between Black men and Black women, that Black women have more relative power within this society, and simultaneously I will hear the other side, or the other perspective on that, in that the most disempowered group of people within this society are Black women rather. Pardon me. I myself think it's okay to embrace the complications and the nuance that yes, and this is for any of you if you actually do, ever participated in a real, analysis of, the way sexism, racism, and other things interact within the power structure of our society, that being American society. Then you will get to the folks that are most often in the most disadvantaged position are Black women on a broad level. Now there's certain spots and pieces of things where that equation, or if we're looking at statistics, you'll see that okay, yeah, like these things don't line up the same way, right? And if we sometimes in our rush to feel strong, we can overlook our ability to actually embrace and see the complications, to see the nuance, and to honor that. So before I get too far off on that, let's sit with just the concept of power for a moment. And again, like in physics, a great simple equation is power equals work over time, right? So work, being the activity, time being the measurement where you use to give some parameter to what you're measuring, right? Now, I've always felt that it's important in life to set some parameters before you try to make an evaluation about something. Meaning, if you ask me, man, what do you think of that guy? Or what do you think about him? Or what do you think about this company? My next question is usually going to be to try to ask you to give me some parameters, right? Some sort of limitations in order to make measurements. Because the slice of time I might have with a person is not a lifetime measure. It is not a full calculation or assessment of their existence. I can only speak to what I've experienced, and then I can, from there, maybe what I've got from secondary sources, as meaning someone that's close to them, someone that's worked with that person, someone that has used that service or business, someone that has visited that place, someone who's walked in those shoes in some way to give me more insight that then I can use what I know about humans, society, and the world to at least get to a reasonable assessment based on the data that I have, which always comes with the grain of salt that I would adjust this assessment based on better information. So back to power. So in my own life, one of the key things or very important things I felt in my own self growth was being given the power over something. Right. So that might start with your toys, is what I remember. And my mom specifically stressing, well, those are yours, so you have to take care of them. Right. So those are your action figures, those are your Lego blocks, those are your Matchbox or Hot Wheels cars. And I had dominion over them to protect them, to use them as I saw fit, and deal with what would happen to them if another kid, I let the kid down the street play with my action figure and he smashed his head with a rock. Right. That's on me. Like, I have the power to make that decision or to decide that what is right and wrong as it pertains to that object. Now, I bear witness, it's an object. We're not talking about people, but ride with me so we can get to the deeper understanding. So that early experience of these are the things I have power over. So I have power over my toys. I have power over my the clothes that I'd wear. I had power. I had some things in some areas of my life that I had power and control over. Let me go again. I had power over my toys and things that were given to me, my books. I had power over my bed, right? Me and my brother, the earliest remembers, at least we had bunk beds, and his bed was the top bed, my bed was the lower bed. I had the power to make that bed, had the power to sleep in that bed in any direction I wanted to sleep in it. I had the power to change the sheets when I felt it was time to change the sheets. I had power over our room. And then anywhere else within the house, and this is I'm talking about, little kid, like 5. You know what I mean? I had power. I had to check in, right, with the higher authority. That was my mom's and my father before he passed. When we started living with my mom and my grandma, and that was my mom and my grandma. And they held a higher level of authority, but I had, dominion to make decisions around those things that were in my purview. And one of the early things, and I think was really important and helped with my own development, is knowing what I did have actually, and being trusted to make decisions about and live with the ramifications of those things that I had power over. As I aged, that moved to things that also had attached to them socially and reality a little bit more margin for harm for myself or others, or risk, i.e. bicycle, right? So you get your first bike, and first maybe you only allowed to ride, you stay on the block, or you can ride in the back right here where I can see you, or you can ride over here, you can ride up to the park and back. You can ride when you're going with, the 2 kids next door, or you're going with this one or that one, but you can't go over here. Eventually, at least for me, you get to an age where you got the bike. It's the afternoon. My mom works. My grandma works. There's nobody here till maybe 6 o'clock, maybe 7, to be asking where I'm at if I go and we ride 3, 4, 5 miles away from where I rest to go do whatever, right? I had the power to make a good decision. Now, we may not always frame our lives that way, right? You might think about, well, I was just out being a kid playing, but you were assigned responsibility, right? To me, the power to impact the world always has responsibility. And that responsibility is something that, as our sense of self develops, impacts how we relate to power, how we also judge others and assess others on how they use their perceived power. So you may not have perceived yourself at 10 years old with a bicycle and no parent or adult to report to from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. at a time when you had power. But you had power then, actually. You were actually entrusted to use those 3 hours within whatever the parameters you were given, and then act in a tune in accordance with that. Some of us may use that time just to go play ball somewhere, go to a park. Maybe you was riding, or maybe you was out doing, I don't know, scams and schemes, or chasing behind somebody else that you admired in your neighborhood or in your community in some way, positive or negative, meaning maybe you was up with the local guys that was really good at ball, and you trying to play ball too, and you playing football with them, or you playing basketball or handball, or maybe you chasing the neighborhood drug dealer, or drug dealers, or various forms of hustlers and what have you, who you saw something that they had that was powerful and you wanted to be a part of it, so you were using your time to pursue that, right? These are all examples of power and power within your own development, right? So the strong force that I always think about in your life and the tone that it gives you sets up often how you're going to use, what power you have. Now then, this starts, I've already peeled into the concept of status. And status is an important concept for me, and it relates to power and in terms of self-development in a very basic way. Now, I'll give you a simple definition of status as a relative, social, professional, or other standing of someone or something. The position of affairs at a particular time, especially in politics or commercial context. Now, I'm not really thinking about that second one, but the first one, where you fit and sit within your social group is a very important part of human life and human development. For people who have experienced the trauma that my community has experienced, one of our areas where we have tension is the development of status, because status is important, a sense, because in terms of the standing that you feel you have and where you fit within the world that is yours. When I talk about history in this country and Black history very specifically, our ability to discuss how existing in a society that for the majority of the time we've been here, we could be subject to violence without anything else to protect us but ourselves, generationally impacts how we perceive and how we feel and how we act. So when you read a poem from Langston Hughes from the Renaissance era, or Conte Cullen, or read some Zora Neale Hurston, or any of the other greats of that age, and some of the concepts they're wrestling with are the acknowledgement that some of us, that things are not as they were for their very immediate grandparents, many of them who may have been in bondage still, right? Things are not as they were, but also meaning, so when I say things are not as they were, meaning they have the day-to-day experience of the realization of a different status within the society and a different type of power than those who were close to them had. Also, things are still, there's still the very clear that at any moment this could be taken away from me. I could be attacked. Police could harass me, and if I'm a shop owner or a club owner that's hosting musicians and making good money, any number of entities that are connected to white people or white, power, as it were, can come and extort me for money, and there will be no legal entity that can protect me. Now, I may, through other series of connections or status or my relationship with some other, another group of folks higher up in the American power structure, be able to fend off, certain things. But I need an interconnecting network that does not include the actual idea that, like, my rights as a citizen and all those things will be a part of what can protect me. Furthermore, we have a common understanding of socially who will keep us safe. Meaning, so within family, it may only be certain people in my family that my family may be the only people within the context of the neighborhood that can keep me safe. So if I'm from a family with a lot of cousins and we're close and we're tight knit and people know, don't mess with the Joneses. You was over there messing with the who? Nah, man, leave them alone. You know what I mean? People know what time it is. And if you are a person that's isolated, maybe you up here in this new place and you ain't got nobody. You ain't got nobody from your town. You ain't got nobody that knows you. The only thing you may have to protect you is your willingness to fight. Right? So violence has a place that shows up in our, community and cultural history, I think different, at least in this land, than others. So, not to dwell too much in that, very abstract piece. So zooming up to now, for a lot of people, what one does to indicate status is also about indicating their power. So, let me give you an example. For some of us, you get a certain kind of car, which either its cost, meaning its relative value, implies that you have access to the means, the resources, and any assumed other things that come with those means and resources to have that car, to possess that car, to drive that car through this type of neighborhood or that type of neighborhood, and other people just can't take it from you. Now that means different things for different people. If you are out here in an environment where more people do not have the ability to exist with a very expensive car, heavy jewelry and chains around your neck, expensive watches, expensive clothes, means it gives the indication, and everyone that knows these things at a more innate level will know that, yeah, he's out here rocking that and carrying himself that way because he's with the business, and or at least we think he is, right? That's where that shows up. It's sort of the and also on a different note, same chord. If you are maybe in a more working class environment, more working class to middle class environment situation, you may show your status and your implied power by, the way you keep your house up. Again, the cars you drive, maybe the fact that you don't do it all with the big chains and all that, but you got the super crisp suits, or you got the other designer labels rocking. Your watches. It may be more subtle, right? It's not the overt style. It's the same thing though. That this is an indication of status and power. Now I know for some people they're like, well, I just like these sneakers. I just like these clothes. Yeah, you do, but also you're very cognizant of. It's like, let me give you an example. I drive a Toyota Prius. The amount of times I hear, "Oh man, you drive a Prius?" from folks, from men, especially from other black men, who, especially if they, know me, and we started talking and we adding on, developing our relationship, transmitting information back and forth. And then they're like, all right, wow, and we'll see where they're processing that they would have some thoughts about themselves if they drove a black Prius, right? If that was their car of choice, and their car that they needed to move through the world, that on some level, because for a lot of people in our community, the type of car you drive is an indicator of like self and who you are, and power, and you want to, I drive a Charger, I drive a Mustang, I drive a Benz, a BMW, I drive a truck, got SUV, big seats and stuff, rims, and all that's cool. So I'm not judging the decision to drive or what kind of car. It's just not something that I derive any sense of my strength in that way from. I do derive from one of my strengths. My important concepts to me and my sense of self is my pragmatism, and doing what I think I need to do to be most effective in the things that do really matter to me, right? So for me, status indicators is how I take care of my family, how I treat the people I love, how I show up when I'm needed, how I dress, which probably needs to be an episode all into itself, especially right now as I'm moving through a transition in those things. But how I dress is a part of how I see myself and see my strength. What I choose to buy and not to buy, how I spend my time, and how prepared I am to be the person that my attribute justice says I am in the world. Those are some of my day-to-day indicators of power. And there's a level of privilege. So I can drive a Prius and at, my height, weight, and power, feel fairly confident for the most part, and also my age. I'm 43, I'm 6'1", one with a little gap with the right shoes on, and over 200, or at least right now, not the best thing, but more like still probably in the 270 range. There's not a lot of people unsolicited that just want to, it's weight classes for a reason. Anybody, and also the way I move in my life. That said, I don't get in and out the car looking like, a sheep. Also, I've crafted and built my life in such a way that for the most part, I don't have to think about that. I don't have to make that a part of my decision making. And I understand that that's a privilege and understand that that's an indicator of sort of the power that I have, the privilege, status, privilege are also, which, I didn't warn y'all, but privilege is coming to the conversation now. It's also, right? So these things mix together. So I know and understand that there's some folks as brothers that are not in a position where they can deal with the perceived weakness that driving certain types of cars may give other people, right, about them. They can't, they can't afford a car at all. You know what I'm saying? They gotta think about just, doing other things, scrapping and surviving. I understand also there's people that they are now in a, maybe working and operating at an executive level where, whether it's good or bad, you the CEO or you a high ranking executive in a Fortune 500 company, or even just a large Fortune 1000 company, a large company, or where you got a staff of maybe 50 people, 60 people that report to you, and they know you are sort of one of the highest paid people, the person whose word makes things go here. And in some of them, you jumping out in the late model. It's not even a new Prius, it's an old Prius. You jumping out the old Prius. You know what I'm saying? Even if you look sharp and you coming ready to bang as it pertains to your professional endeavors, they may sort of, he out here driving a Prius. I like Priuses. I'll tell you right now, but I understand how what we associate with objects relates to how we perceive someone's strength, how we perceive their status, and then due to that, what we give them the privilege to do or not do, to be or not be. These are important things, and they're also things though that you have to take the time to make some decisions about who you gonna be. Because the other flip of that is how you perceive and think of others and how they impact you. So zooming up to go for this piece, to go back to the earlier piece of my own, growing up. So one of my unhealthy relationships with power and authority that I learned I've had to fight off and continue to fight off as I've aged is either being overly concerned with not getting the outcomes I want, so therefore I will not attempt certain things. So I'll be specific around like employment opportunities, right? So my understanding of the employment world that I ingested through how I came up was that you needed to have certain credentials, and if you don't have those very specific credentials, don't even waste your time talking about employment in certain fields, even if you think one, your basic personal intellectual capacity means you could learn the work. Two, maybe you know something about it, or know a lot about it, you just don't have any direct employment space experience, but you understand the area, and or also that generally people like me, black men of a certain age, the only way we will get consideration is to come in strapped with the heavy duty, letters behind your name or whatever. I've learned that for certain people, none of that matters. They just go up, apply, and start talking for all kinds of jobs. And that also other people, certain people, will give those same people opportunities because they like them or they have a hunch or this and that. And sometimes, especially if you're, a charismatic, charming individual, you may be able to pull off that too. But I did not believe, I did not think, I did not understand that was a type of power or privilege that I could access for more parts of my life than I'm happy. More parts of my life than I thought, I guess. Yeah, like part of me, I now realize, and I've learned very well over the last 10 years, that the downside of putting yourself out there is largely small unless you're making promises that you can't keep within a circle that can impact you. And what I'm trying to say is I was assigning more power to some of those employers I was interested in, some of those places I would have done better to at least apply and see if I could get in the door on an interview. If I would have reached out and tried to extend my hand just to get some information from someone on the inside that knew some things, and then see if I could use that as leverage, a concept that relates to power, to get an opportunity to see if I could move into that space or that type of work. I assigned a certain level of power to impact that environment to those people, and then made the decision that my power was not capable of moving that situation. This is something that I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of men do. I find myself in conversations where I feel I'm, adding on with a brother, and he's sort of kind of giving me different excuses as to why the power structure or the power that these other entities have won't allow him to manifest himself in the way that he thinks he should be, or that he's not doing what he needs to do because these powers are against him, and that therefore those powers are the ones that are most important for him to see success. I often don't agree. I often experience brothers feeling the presence of that power or force that is currently moving in their world. As an example, the child support system. And then get engaged in these conversations about the unfairness and this and that, and how they, so I'm doing all these complicated machinations to figure how to relieve this very specific thing's presence, but doing it in a way that, we're making even complicated, long-winded, broad ideas about women, about the structure of society, about, national status and federal, all this citizenship roles, all this stuff with something that, because of how it's impacting you, if you know anything about stress in the human brain and the body, and when something stresses you, it actually moves where your brain tries to resolve the issue to different parts of your cerebral cortex. And it can, as I see it, never experienced, it also can lead you to not the most well-regulated machine, or mechanism, rather, to resolve that particular problem. So your power and status and your privilege can often point to where you may, or becomes a place where there's leverage for or against you. Or for or against, your particular interests or the interests of your community or your body. So some places that, and I think this is the right time to pivot to this, to start getting towards a close, is, well, what do you do with all this, Justice? Right? What do I do with this? Here's my prescription. This is my start off for 2020 is the first thing is to take some time to get a sense of what you care about, and then how effective are you in keeping those things at the center of your life, and how do you impact them coming into existence? If you have a good relationship and you're married or whatever have you in a long-term partnership, whatever the terms and the concepts that you use to acknowledge that, man, look at that and acknowledge yo, I have a good relationship, and it's not magic. I have a good relationship with this person because of how I move in the world. That is an indicator of your power. That is something where you're strong. That is something where you are impacting your own reality and the reality of this person you love and care about, so that y'all have a mutually beneficial experience. So, that's as an example somewhere to start. Think of some other things, whether it's your work, your professional things that you're doing, maybe your cultural life, maybe if you're dealing with whatever nations as it pertains to the religious, spiritual concepts. If that's something that's working for you, you put a lot of energy, you put a lot of work over time into that. So acknowledge if that's something that's bringing back rewards to you, that's somewhere where you have power. That's one thing. The second thing is to think about those things that get that reaction out of you where you feel threat or the need to challenge an idea that maybe undermines or at least questions those activities, challenges your sense of status, is to explore what things do you think give you status? What things are important to you because they become a part of how you see yourself and reinforce the idea of who you are. And spend some time to be comfortable engaging with whether or not, what's the source of that? Is that a good thing? That's something I need. Is that something I actually need? We've just come out of the season of the year where a lot of people's status is flaunted around, with robust largesse. That's probably funny to put those two words next to each other, but the holiday season is a time where especially people that have a lot of money feel obligated to spend and to buy and to give. As an indicator, they feel obligated to spend, to give, to fund all kinds of things as an indicator to show, how much money they can spend. Look at our house. Look at these fancy crystal glasses and this and that. And we're going to have the really nice holiday party. And I'm going to do the other thing and I'm shaping a community or a world around me that acknowledges my strength. I do my New Year's whatever thing every year. We go to Vegas, pop it with the homies, whatever it is, right? Wherever you sit within our different levels of society, there may be some way that you feel obligated. If you're a manager in a company or business, you may feel obligated to give out gifts to staff. If you are in a I know some folks feel obligated to give people Christmas gifts, even though they ain't even into Christmas, because Christmas means something to those other people, so they feel like they still have to participate. I don't know, process it, think about it, but get a sense of your status. Do a little research, do a little reading, get a sense of that. Then get in tune, check in with where you're afforded certain privileges. Whether those are privileges that have been derived from how you move or the privileges that were unearned, meaning you just came in with them. You come in with them, and to whatever degree, you will be able to move without as much restriction based on that, whether that's your race, your gender, size, demeanor, language style, able-bodiedness, what have you. Look at those. Just start to get a sense of how those things are moving in your world, how you're operating with those, and how they impact who you think you are. Because for me, in 2020, I'm in tune with certain pieces, and there's stuff that I need to enhance, and there's other stuff that I need to adjust. I need to fine tune so that it is not something that is causing drag in my ability to move and deal with free transportation. So with that, I'm going to prepare to wrap on this first episode, or this first version of what other podcast for this year that I'm not going to give a particular name at the moment on the air, but it'll probably be a name in the title by the time I release this in the next day or two. Some things to get you prepped. As I stated in the previous episode, I am going to re-release two of my episodes that kind of fell out of the loop from last year. One they'll be out on Friday, this week and Friday of the next week. And then there'll be more to come, in the coming days. As like I said, I'm doing some things differently. And with that, I'm going to start to close us up. Thank you for listening to the Ask Your Oldhead podcast with Justice Rajee. Thank you to Copwood Consulting. Thank you to you, the listener. Please rate, subscribe, share, pass along. Play it in your office if you feel so inclined. Play it while you're doing the Sunday cleaning. Give me some feedback. You can find me anywhere on the internet at Justice Rajee. That's JUSTICRAJEE. You can go to AskYourOldhead.com and find every episode of the podcast posted there. You can also go to AskYourOldhead.libsyn.com and find every episode of the past podcast releases. I can't talk. Also, you can locate and find all of the podcasts on YouTube. There will be some other videos interspersed in there in the coming year as I get to work on some great collaborations and some other things with some friends and partners. If you like what I'm doing, feel free to let me know. And even do a better turn, pass it to someone that you know, and at least give them a listen. Tell them, give them a chance to hear what you liked about what I'm doing here. You can find me most often on Instagram at Justice Rajee. You can find me on Twitter, which I'm getting in a little bit more from there time to time. If you like the show, grab yourself a hoodie at the Etsy shop. If you search Ask Your Oldhead on the Etsy or on the internet, it'll come up. But also the link is right there on my Instagram, top of the page. It's also on the blog. So at AskYourOldhead.com. There's pictures in there, there's images, photographs I've taken of some of my guests and other things. All of this is important to me and is a part of what I've been trying to do creatively with this podcast for the last 4 years. So I appreciate any engagement and any sharing that you can do. So with that, I'm going to catch up with you on the next one. Thank you for listening. Peace.